She was left at the altar, but fate had other plans. On her wedding day, Ava was humiliated when her fiancé vanished without a trace. Desperate to save face, her family made a shocking decision. Hire a complete stranger, Liam, to be her stand-in. Room. What was meant to be a temporary fix turned into a whirlwind of secrets, passion, and an unexpected love story that no one saw coming. But who really is Liam? And what secret is he hiding? Stay until the end to uncover the truth. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories. Ava Sinclair stood at the altar, her heart pounding against her ribs as she clutched the bouquet in her trembling hands. The sun cast a golden glow over the pristine beach, waves gently kissing the shore, as if to celebrate what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. But where was Noah? She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her head, the way Noah would be standing there, smiling at her with that boyish grin, his deep blue eyes full of love. They had planned this for months, down to every tiny detail. The elegant floral arrangements, the custom-made wedding arch draped in silk, the perfectly coordinated outfits of the bridal party. Everything was exactly as it should be. Everything except the groom. Guests shifted in their seats, their murmurs growing louder. Whispers rippled through the crowd, their voices barely masked by the ocean breeze. Where is he? This is taking too long. Did he get cold feet? Ava swallowed hard, trying to ignore the murmuring voices, the curious glances, the uneasy shifting in the sea of white chairs. Her mother, Margaret Sinclair, sat in the front row, her hands folded tightly over her lap, her expression betraying nothing but growing impatience. Her father, Thomas, checked his watch for the 5th time, his lips pressed into a firm line. Beside her, Harper Monroe, her best friend and maid of honor, gave her a nervous glance. "Ova," she whispered. "Have you tried calling him again?" Ava nodded, gripping the phone hidden beneath the folds of her gown. She had already called Noah 5 times, and each time, the call went straight to voicemail. The screen still showed her last text, unread. "Where are you? Please tell me you're on your way." Still nothing. A wave of nausea rolled through her stomach, the bitter taste of anxiety rising in her throat. Then came the unmistakable sound of high heels clicking against the wooden platform leading to the altar. Ava turned as her mother approached, her expensive pearl earrings glistening in the setting sun. "What is going on?" Margaret hissed, her voice barely above a whisper, but laced with irritation. "The guests are waiting, and you're standing here looking like a fool. Where is Noah?" Ava shook her head, her vision blurring with unshed tears. "I don't know." Margaret's lips thinned, her eyes flashing with something dangerously close to fury. "This is unacceptable," she muttered. "We cannot be humiliated like this, Ava. Do you know who is sitting out there? Business partners, investors, people who trust us. If they see this wedding collapse, do you have any idea what it will do to our reputation?" Reputation. That was always the priority, wasn't it? Ava's chest tightened. For a split second, she wanted to scream that it didn't matter, that she was the one being humiliated, that this wasn't just a business transaction. But before she could speak, Eleanor, the wedding planner, rushed onto the platform, her face pale. "Some of the guests are getting restless. A few are already leaving," she whispered urgently. "If we don't start soon, people will think the worst." Ava felt her entire world spin. How had everything unraveled so quickly? And then, in the midst of her despair, the most unexpected thing happened. A man stepped onto the wooden platform, looking just as confused as she felt. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo, but a crisp white button-down shirt rolled up at the sleeves and black slacks. His skin was tanned, his dark brown hair slightly tousled by the wind. A tattoo peeked out from the inside of his forearm as he adjusted the cake box in his hands. Wedding cake delivery? The man said hesitantly, glancing between Ava and the group of tense onlookers. Ava stared at him, her mind barely processing his presence. He had a rugged handsomeness about him, a sharp contrast to Noah's polished elegance. But more importantly, he bore an eerie resemblance to her missing fiancé. Not identical, but similar enough in height, build, and structure that, in the right lighting and the right suit. Margaret turned to her daughter, her calculating mind already working faster than Ava's own. "Ava," she said, her voice suddenly smooth, almost persuasive. "I think we've just found our solution." Ava blinked in shock.
"What?"
Her father straightened, rubbing his chin as he studied the delivery man. "He does look a little like Noah," he admitted. The man furrowed his brows, stepping back warily. "Wait, what?" Margaret's expression turned from frustration to something dangerously close to triumph. "Young man, how would you like to make a lot of money today?" Liam Carter, completely unaware of what he had just walked into, looked between them with a mixture of amusement and unease. "I think I missed something here." Ava's heart pounded as she realized what her mother was suggesting. She turned to Liam, meeting his sharp green eyes with desperation. "I know this is insane," she whispered, voice shaking, "but..." "Am willing to be my stand?" Liam blinked, his grip tightening around the cake box as he processed Ava's words. His brow furrowed in disbelief. "You want me to do what?" Ava swallowed hard, barely believing she was saying it herself. "I need you to pretend to be my groom." Liam let out a short laugh, glancing at the guests shifting impatiently in their seats. "You're joking, right?" "I wish I was," Ava muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Margaret stepped forward, eyes locked on Liam, like a businesswoman sealing a deal. "Handsomely." Liam arched a brow. "How handsomely?" $500,000, Thomas Sinclair said, stepping in with the same no-nonsense tone he used in boardroom negotiations. "Cash, just for getting through the ceremony and keeping our reputation intact." Liam's green eyes flickered with something unreadable. He glanced at Ava again, then at the crowd beyond. "So let me get this straight. Your fiancé bails, and instead of calling off the wedding, you want me, some random cake guy, to step in and marry you." Ava let out a shaky breath. "It wouldn't be real." Liam hesitated, shifting his weight. "And what happens after?" "We announce an annulment later. Say it didn't work out," Margaret answered briskly, already mentally crafting the perfect pier spin. Liam looked at Ava again, really looked at her this time. She was stunning, that much was undeniable. But beyond that, there was desperation in her eyes, a silent plea that made something in him twist unexpectedly. He exhaled.
"No offense, but this is insane."
Ava's hands clenched at her sides. "I know, but I'm begging you, please." For a long moment, Liam just stood there, staring at the bride in front of him, before finally running a hand through his hair. "Screw it," he muttered. "Fine, I'll do it." Margaret's face lit up with satisfaction. "Good. There's a tux in the groom's suite. Get changed. Quickly." Liam sighed. "Guess I'm getting married today." With that, he was whisked away by a frantic Patricia, the wedding planner. while Ava remained rooted to the spot, her heart hammering wildly. 15 minutes later, the ceremony was ready to begin. Guests whispered curiously as the groom, now Liam, stood at the altar. The masquerade masks, a last-minute solution to hide the switch, had been passed out to the guests under the guise of an exclusive wedding theme. Ava took a deep breath as she stepped onto the aisle, her veil shielding the sheer panic in her eyes. As she approached, Liam straightened in his suit, looking far too comfortable for someone who had just been roped into the most ridiculous scheme of the century. He offered her a smirk as she reached him. Not bad for a guy who was delivering cake 30 minutes ago. Huh? Ava resisted the urge to groan. Just get through this. The priest, oblivious to the last-minute change, smiled warmly at the couple. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of... He glanced at his notes. Ava Sinclair and Chad Lancaster. Ava flinched. Liam's smirk dropped. Margaret cleared her throat loudly. Actually, Father, there's been a slight adjustment. This is Liam Carter. The priest's brows lifted, but years of experience in officiating weddings kept him from showing more than a flicker of surprise.
Ah, of course. He nodded, continuing seamlessly, though a few guests exchanged confused glances.
Ava barely breathed as the ceremony proceeded. She stole glances at Liam, expecting him to look awkward or out of place, but he stood there with easy confidence, as if he belonged. When it came time for the vows, she hesitated, her throat tightening. She swallowed. What could she say when this wasn't even real? Liam must have sensed her hesitation because he leaned in slightly, voice low enough for only her to hear. Just breathe. And then, to her absolute shock, he took her hand and said, Ava, I promise to stand here today, looking ridiculously handsome, so you don't have to be humiliated in front of 100 people. A stunned silence filled the air. Then, unexpectedly, laughter. The tension in the room melted as the guests chuckled at his easygoing humor. Even Ava found herself smiling despite everything. The priest cleared his throat. Well, that's certainly a unique vow. And she met Liam's gaze, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt the weight on her chest ease slightly. I promise to let you keep standing there looking ridiculously handsome, she said, playing along. More laughter. Liam squeezed her hand, amusement flickering in his eyes. See? Then came the part she hadn't prepared for. You may now kiss the bride. Ava's breath caught. The moment stretched too long, and she swore she could hear her own heartbeat in the silence. Liam, unfazed, leaned in, lowering her veil slowly. Relax, he murmured. It's just a kiss. And then, before she could protest, his lips met hers. It was supposed to be quick. A brief, harmless press of lips, just enough to convince the audience. But the second their mouths touched, something shifted. The world around them faded, and for a fleeting moment, it felt too real. Liam pulled away, his gaze lingering on hers longer than necessary. The guests erupted into cheers, and Ava forced herself to smile, even as her heart pounded wildly. This was just an act. It wasn't real. So why did it feel like it was? As the reception began, Ava did her best to keep up the facade. The guests, now wearing their masquerade masks, seemed none the wiser to the deception. Laughter and conversation filled the grand ballroom, the music swelling as servers carried trays of champagne through the crowd. From the outside, it looked like the perfect wedding, except the groom was a complete stranger. Liam sat beside her at the head table, leaning back in his chair with an amused smirk. "So, Mrs. Carter, what's next? Do we ride off into the sunset, or does this fairy tale end right after dessert?" Ava shot him a glare, lowering her voice. "We need to keep this going for at least the night. No sudden moves, no acting suspicious. If anyone asks, we're madly in love." Liam chuckled, taking a sip of his drink. "Oh, don't worry, sweetheart. I'm a fantastic actor." Margaret approached them, her expression sharp as she handed Ava a glass of champagne. "That was some quick thinking up there," she said, her voice low. "But don't get too comfortable. We still have to control the story once this night is over." "I know," Ava said, glancing at the guests. "We'll make up something believable. Maybe say we're going on an extended honeymoon, then announce later that we grew apart." Margaret nodded approvingly, then turned to Liam. "And you. You may have saved us today, but remember, this isn't real. No slipping up." Liam grinned, raising his glass. "Don't worry. I wouldn't dream of falling for my fake wife." Ava rolled her eyes, but forced a polite smile as her father approached. Thomas placed a firm hand on Liam's shoulder. "Son," he said, his voice filled with exaggerated warmth, "I have to say, that was a damn fine ceremony. You handled yourself well." Liam straightened slightly, surprised by the unexpected praise. Thanks, sir. Just wanted to make sure Ava didn't have to go through anything embarrassing." "That's what a real man does," Thomas said, nodding approvingly. "I must admit, I was hesitant when Ava told us about you. But now I see why she chose you." Ava nearly choked on her drink.
Well, you know how it is.
"Love at first sight." Liam smirked but played along. "What can I say? She swept me off my feet." Thomas let out a booming laugh. "Good man. Now, I hope you're ready to step into the family business. You'll have a lot of responsibilities as my son-in-law." Liam blinked. "Family business?" Ava paled. "Dad, we talked about this. Let's not pressure him tonight." "Nonsense," Thomas said, waving a hand. "If he's your husband, he's part of the Sinclair legacy now." Liam hesitated, and Ava could see the realization hitting him. This wasn't just a one-night act. If they weren't careful, they were about to get tangled in a web far more complicated than they'd planned. Before either could respond, Liz appeared, grinning mischievously. "Sorry to interrupt, but the guests are asking for a first dance." Ava turned to Liam, trying to gauge his reaction. He gave her a slow smirk. "Well, can't disappoint our adoring fans, can we?" Before she could protest, Liam took her hand and led her to the dance floor. The music softened into something slow and romantic as he placed one hand on her waist, the other clasping hers gently. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" she whispered. "A little," he admitted. "But mostly, I just want to make sure we sell this." Ava sighed, allowing herself to move with him, their steps falling into perfect rhythm. She tried to remind herself that this was an act, that Liam was just playing along, but the way he held her, the way his fingers lightly brushed against her skin, made it feel dangerously real. "You're a surprisingly good dancer," she murmured, trying to distract herself. Liam chuckled. "You pick up a thing or two when you crash enough weddings." She gave him a sharp look. "You crash weddings?" "Only the good ones." Ava couldn't help but laugh. For the first time that night, some of the tension eased. But as they swayed, she became acutely aware of the way he was looking at her, It wasn't teasing or smug. It was something else. Something unsettlingly sincere. "Hey," he said softly, "for what it's worth, you don't deserve what happened today. That guy's an idiot." Ava swallowed the lump in her throat, forcing a smile. "But it's not like I had a choice." Liam tilted his head. "Didn't you?" She started to respond, but before she could, a commotion near the entrance caught her attention. The doors to the ballroom swung open, and the murmur of guests quickly turned into shocked whispers. Standing there, looking disheveled and frantic, was Chad. Ava's stomach dropped. The music came to a screeching halt. Chad's eyes scanned the room until they landed on her, and then on Liam. His expression darkened as he stormed forward. "What the hell is going on here?" Liam, unfazed, tightened his hold on Ava's waist. "Ah." The missing groom finally makes an appearance. Ava's heart pounded as Chad's gaze burned into her. "Ava, what is this?" he demanded. "Why is he standing next to you? Why is everyone acting like this is normal?" Margaret was already striding toward them, her face unreadable. Thomas stood as well, his usual composure cracking. "Chad," Ava started, her voice steady despite the chaos unraveling around her. "You weren't here, so I had to make a choice." His jaw clenched. "This isn't funny. You think you can just replace me?" Liam smirked. "Looks like she already did." Chad's hands balled into fists. "Ava, we need to talk. Alone." Ava hesitated, feeling Liam's grip on her hand tighten ever so slightly. The room held its breath, waiting for her next move. And in that moment, she realized this was far from over. Ava's heart pounded as Chad's words hung heavy in the air. The guests, once lively and entertained by the masquerade, now sat frozen in anticipation. Liam's grip on her hand was firm, a silent question passing between them. Was she going to face Chad alone, or would she stand her ground? "I don't think there's anything left to talk about," Ava said, her voice clear and unwavering. Chad took a step forward, his expression twisted in frustration. "Are you serious? You just married a complete stranger, Ava? You think that's better than waiting for me?" Liam let out a quiet chuckle. "Well, technically, you left her waiting." She didn't seem too eager to keep waiting. A muscle in Chad's jaw ticked as his gaze flickered between them. He was disheveled, his shirt slightly wrinkled, his tie loose. It was clear he had rushed here, but the question remained. Why now? Where had he been all this time? Margaret stepped forward, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Chad, I think you've embarrassed my daughter enough for one day. You have no right to storm in here demanding explanations." Thomas, still seated, narrowed his eyes. "I suggest you leave before you make an even bigger scene." But Chad wasn't going anywhere. His gaze locked onto Ava again, softer this time, almost pleading. "Please, just give me 5 minutes," he said. "I can explain." Ava hesitated, but only for a second. "No," she said firmly. "There's nothing to explain, Chad. You made your choice." His brows furrowed. "That's not fair." "You know what's not fair?" she cut in, her voice rising slightly. "Waking up on my wedding day thinking I was going to start a new life with the man I loved, only to be humiliated in front of everyone. You didn't just leave me, Chad. You didn't just leave me, Chad. Left me to clean up the mess." The tension in the room was thick enough to suffocate. Chad's lips parted like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. Liam stood beside Ava, quiet but watchful, like he was waiting for Chad to step out of line. After a beat of silence, Chad let out a sharp breath, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't do it to hurt you, Ava." "But you did," she said, voice softer now but no less strong. "And I won't let you do it again." For a long moment, he just stared at her, the weight of her words settling between them. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. The moment the door shut behind him, the entire ballroom seemed to exhale at once. Whispers spread through the crowd, but Ava barely heard them. Her body felt light, almost dizzy, like she had just run a marathon. Liam turned to her, his smirk replaced with something unreadable.
"Well, that was dramatic."
Ava let out a breathy laugh, shaking her head. "You have no idea." Margaret wasted no time regaining control of the situation. She turned to the guests, offering a dazzling smile as if the whole thing had been a part of the evening's entertainment. "Well, now that that's settled, why don't we get back to celebrating?" The tension broke, and just like that, the music started again, the guests slowly returning to their drinks, their laughter, their conversations. Ava, on the other hand, felt drained. She turned to Liam. "Can we get out of here?" Liam raised an eyebrow but nodded. "I thought you'd never ask." Without another word, they slipped out of the reception, unnoticed by most of the guests. As soon as they stepped outside, the cool night air hit Ava's skin, and she let out a deep sigh. Liam loosened his tie, glancing at her.
"So what's next, Mrs. Carter? Are we keeping this charade going, or do I get to retire from my husband duties now?"
Ava hesitated. The rational thing to do would be to end it, make up an excuse about an annulment, let people assume it didn't work out. But something about the way Chad had looked at her, like he wasn't done, like he might come back, made her stomach twist. She wasn't going to let him ruin her again. Her eyes met Liam's, and for the first time, she saw more than just a stranger who had stepped in at the last moment. He had been steady through all of this, unwavering, and despite his sarcastic attitude, he had protected her. She straightened her shoulders. "We keep going," she said, "at least for now." Liam tilted his head. "Interesting." "You don't have to stay," she added quickly. "I'll figure it out. I can—" He cut her off with a small laugh. "Relax, sweetheart. I'm in." She frowned.
"Just like that?"
Liam shrugged. "You're not the only one who hates losing." His smirk returned, this time laced with something almost challenging. "Besides, playing husband for a little while longer might be more fun than I expected." Ava wasn't sure what she had just signed up for, but one thing was certain. This was far from over. The following morning, Ava woke to the sound of waves crashing outside the window. The soft golden light of dawn spilled into the hotel's suite, casting a warm glow over the room. For a moment, she forgot everything. The wedding disaster, Chad's betrayal, and the fact that she had married a man she barely knew. But then, as she stretched, the unfamiliar weight of the wedding ring on her finger brought it all rushing back. She wasn't alone. Liam lay on the couch, one arm draped over his eyes, his breathing deep and even. He had refused to take the bed last night, joking that fake husbands should at least have the decency to be fake gentlemen. Ava had been too exhausted to argue. She sat up carefully, brushing her hair away from her face, and took a deep breath. She had to figure out her next move. The longer she stayed married to Liam, the harder it would be to untangle herself from this situation. But Chad's sudden reappearance still left a bad taste in her mouth. The way he had looked at her last night, like she was a possession he had left behind and decided to reclaim, sent a shiver down her spine. Liam stirred, stretching before cracking one eye open. "Morning, wifey." Ava rolled her eyes. "Don't call me that." He smirked. You sure? You looked pretty comfortable in that bed last night. Ignoring him, Ava got up and walked to the window, staring out at the ocean. The morning breeze smelled of salt and fresh beginnings, but she felt anything but renewed. She needed to decide what to do next. Are you thinking about your runaway groom? Liam's voice came from behind her, lighter than usual, but still laced with curiosity. She turned to him, crossing her arms. No. Liam sat up, rubbing a hand over his jaw. Well, I did a little thinking myself. If you want to keep up appearances, we should probably stay married a little longer. Ava frowned. What? Why? Liam leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Think about it. If we annul this thing right away, people will talk. Your business partners, your parents. They'll know something's off. If we stick it out for a bit, maybe a few months, we can call it an amicable split and avoid all the questions. She hesitated. It made sense. The last thing she wanted was more public humiliation. And what do you get out of this? Liam shrugged. I could use a change of pace. And let's be honest. You intrigue me, Ava. She scoffed. I intrigue you? You do, he said simply. You're stubborn, sharp, and despite everything, you don't break. That's impressive. Ava didn't know how to respond to that. No one had ever described her like that before. She sat back down on the edge of the bed, rubbing her temple. Fine. But we need rules. Liam grinned. Of course, lay 'em on me. No unnecessary touching. No pet names. And absolutely no kissing in front of anyone unless we have no other choice. His smirk widened.
So, if we have to kiss, you'd be okay with it.
Ava grabbed a pillow and threw it at him, but he caught it effortlessly, laughing. I'm just saying, we need to be convincing. Convincing, yes. Over the top? No, she shot back. And one more thing, no secrets. Liam's expression shifted slightly, but it was gone as quickly as it came. Agreed. She narrowed her eyes. Are you sure? Because I feel like you're hiding something. He placed a hand over his heart. Ava, you wound me. She didn't laugh. Something about the way he had agreed so quickly made her uneasy, but she didn't have the energy to press him. All right, she sighed. We go back to the city and act like a happy couple until we find a good excuse to break it off. Liam stood, stretching. Sounds easy enough. Somehow, Ava knew it wouldn't be. Later that afternoon, they left the island together. The moment they stepped into the airport, Ava felt the weight of their decision settling in. People stared, whispering as they walked by, but Liam handled it with ease, slipping his arm around her waist and flashing a charming smile. You're enjoying this, aren't you? She muttered under her breath. A little, he admitted. I like the attention. Ava sighed, resisting the urge to shove him away. Just don't get used to it. As they boarded the plane, she caught sight of a familiar figure in the distance. Chad. He was standing near one of the gates, watching her. His gaze was unreadable, but there was no mistaking the determination in his stance. Ava quickly turned away, gripping Liam's arm a little tighter. What's wrong? He asked, voice low. Chad's here, she murmured. Liam's grip tightened around her waist. Let him watch. You're my wife now. Ava knew it was just part of their act, but the way Liam said it sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. She didn't have time to dwell on it, though, because as they took their seats and the plane prepared for takeoff, she realized something. This was only the beginning. Ava had never been one for grand entrances, but walking through the doors of the city's most exclusive gala with Liam at her side felt like stepping into the spotlight of a play she hadn't rehearsed for. The chandeliers above cast golden light across the sea of well-dressed guests, their murmurs blending with the soft hum of classical music. Liam, in his perfectly tailored black suit, looked as effortlessly confident as ever. He held her hand loosely but possessively, a silent reminder of the roles they were playing. Fake husband, loving newlywed. The thought made her stomach twist. "Relax," Liam murmured, his lips close to her ear. "You look tense." Ava exhaled sharply. "Maybe that's because I'm walking into a room full of people who think I married the love of my life, when in reality, I married a guy I bribed with $500,000. Liam smirked. "And yet, you're still standing here with me, almost like you're enjoying it." She shot him a sharp glare, but before she could respond, a familiar voice interrupted. "Ava." She turned just in time to see her mother, Linda, approaching with an air of practiced grace. Her gown was a rich emerald green, a perfect match to the expensive jewels glistening at her ears and neck. "There you are, darling," Linda said, smiling at Ava before giving Liam an approving once-over. "And Liam, you're looking quite dashing tonight." Liam flashed his signature grin. "I try." Ava barely had time to register her mother's approval before Linda pulled her aside, lowering her voice. "Have you heard?" Ava frowned. "Heard what?" Linda's gaze flickered toward the far side of the room, where a small crowd had gathered around a man she knew all too well. Chad. Her stomach dropped. He was here, looking infuriatingly unbothered, dressed in a navy suit that screamed wealth and arrogance, holding a champagne flute like he belonged among them. Ava clenched her jaw. "What is he doing here?" Linda sighed. "His father is still a major investor in the company. We couldn't exactly uninvite him. But don't worry, darling. Everyone knows you traded up." Ava resisted the urge to groan. She wasn't interested in trading up or making Chad jealous. She just wanted him gone. As if sensing her frustration, Liam slid back into the conversation, wrapping an arm around her waist and pressing a brief kiss to her temple. "Everything all right?" he asked, voice smooth and casual. Ava stiffened at the unexpected touch, but she nodded. "Yeah." Just surprised to see an unwanted guest. Liam followed her gaze, and his smirk faltered slightly. Chad must have felt the attention because his eyes met Ava's across the room. A slow smirk spread across his face, like he was enjoying the fact that he still occupied space in her thoughts. Liam tightened his grip on her waist. "You want me to punch him for you? Make it look like a heroic act of love?" Ava rolled her eyes.
Absolutely not.
Liam chuckled. "Fine. But just so you know, I'd make it look very convincing." She fought back a smile. "Noted." Before she could dwell on the tension twisting in her chest, another figure emerged from the crowd. Abigail, the woman Chad had run off with. Ava had expected to feel anger, maybe even heartbreak. But what hit her instead was an odd sense of relief. Because looking at them now, she realized something. Chad wasn't her problem anymore. Abigail whispered something in Chad's ear, but his attention remained on Ava. Then, with slow, calculated steps, he made his way toward them. Liam's fingers brushed against hers, his silent way of asking if she was okay. She straightened. "Let's give them a show." Liam's brows lifted slightly in amusement. "Oh. And what do you have in mind, Mrs. Callahan?" Ava turned to face him, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Kiss me." Liam didn't hesitate. His hands cupped her face, and before she could second-guess herself, His lips were on hers. The world around them melted away. The noise, the people, even Chad, all of it faded into the background as Liam kissed her, like he meant it, like they weren't pretending. Ava knew it was just for show, just to make a point, but that didn't stop the heat from crawling up her spine or the way her fingers instinctively gripped his lapels. When they finally broke apart, Liam was smirking, but his breathing wasn't as steady as it had been before. Now that was convincing, he murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Ava swallowed hard, turning just in time to see Chad's expression shift from smug amusement to something else entirely. Good. Good. Without another word, she linked her arm through Liam's and led him away, her head held high. Maybe this fake marriage wasn't such a terrible idea after all. Ava barely had time to process the whirlwind of emotions from the gala before she found herself in an even more complicated situation. The night had been a blur. Dancing under the chandeliers, Chad's smug face, the kiss with Liam that left her more breathless than she cared to admit. But now, as she stepped into the grand suite Liam had arranged for them at the resort, reality came crashing down. She tossed her clutch onto the dresser and exhaled sharply. I still can't believe Chad had the audacity to show up. Liam, loosening his tie, leaned against the door frame with an easy smirk. You should have seen his face when I kissed you. Priceless. Ava shot him a look. That wasn't part of the plan. Liam shrugged, unbothered. You told me to make it convincing. She scoffed, running a hand through her hair. She stopped herself, shaking her head. He studied her for a moment before stepping closer. You're overthinking. Ava folded her arms. And you're underthinking. Liam grinned. That's why we balance each other out. She rolled her eyes but didn't argue. She wandered over to the massive window overlooking the ocean. The waves rolled gently under the moonlight, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside her. Liam moved beside her, his reflection visible in the glass. Ava hesitated before answering. It's not just Chad. She turned to face him, searching for the right words. It's this whole thing. I keep waiting for the moment it all collapses. Liam's gaze softened. Then, don't. She let out a dry laugh. Easier said than done. He was quiet for a moment then, with a sigh, he reached for the bottle of whiskey on the minibar and poured himself a drink. You know, he mused, swirling the amber liquid. I've dealt with a lot of people who fake things, fake friendships, fake loyalty. But you're terrible at pretending. Ava frowned. Excuse me? Liam smirked. You act tough, like this arrangement is just a means to an end. But I see the way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. Her stomach flipped. Oh, please. He took a slow sip of whiskey. It's cute, really. Ava groaned and turned away, but before she could escape, Liam caught her wrist. The touch was light, but it sent a jolt through her. She swallowed hard as she faced him again. You keep running from this, he said, voice low. From me? Her pulse raced, because this isn't real. Liam's jaw tightened, but his smirk remained. Then why does it feel real? She hated that she didn't have an answer. The silence stretched between them, charged and heavy. The only sound was the distant crash of waves outside. Finally, Liam released her wrist and took a step back. I'll take the couch, he said, changing the subject. You take the bed. Ava blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift. What? He grabbed a pillow and tossed it onto the couch. I figure if we're going to keep up this charade, you might as well get a good night's sleep. She hesitated. part of her wanting to argue, but exhaustion won out. Fine. Without another word, she climbed into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. She listened as Liam settled onto the couch, the room dipping into silence. Minutes passed, but sleep refused to come. Her mind replayed the night's events, Chad's presence, Liam's kiss, the way he had looked at her just now, as if he knew every thought racing through her head. And worse, the way part of her didn't mind. She sighed, rolling onto her side. "Liam?" He made a sound of acknowledgement from across the room. "Thank you," she murmured, unsure why she felt the need to say it. A beat of silence then. "You're welcome, Mrs. Callahan." She groaned. "I regret this already." Liam chuckled, and for some reason, the sound made her smile. Maybe, just maybe, she was in deeper than she thought. Ava knew something was wrong the moment she stepped into the grand ballroom. The air was thick with the scent of champagne and fresh roses, but beneath the polished elegance of the venue, tension crackled like a live wire. She wasn't sure if it was just her own nerves, or if the people around her sensed it too. Either way, she could feel the weight of unspoken truths pressing down on her. Liam stood beside her, his posture as effortlessly composed as ever. He looked every bit the part of the devoted husband, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back as he guided her through the room. To anyone watching, they were the perfect couple. Powerful, untouchable. But Ava could feel the subtle stiffness in his touch, the way his fingers pressed a fraction too hard against her spine. "You're tense," she murmured under her breath, forcing a smile as she greeted a passing guest. Liam's jaw ticked. "And you're observant." She arched a brow.
You think I wouldn't notice?
His lips curled into something that almost resembled amusement. "I was hoping you wouldn't." A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne flutes, and Ava took one without breaking stride. She took a slow sip, using the coolness of the drink to ground herself. The night had barely begun, but she already felt like she was balancing on the edge of something dangerous. Then she saw him. Chad. Her breath caught as she spotted him across the room, looking far too comfortable for a man who should have been ashamed to show his face. He was surrounded by familiar faces. Business partners, investors, people who had once smiled at Ava as if she belonged in their world. And there he was, laughing, sipping his drink as if he hadn't humiliated her, as if he hadn't destroyed everything she'd believed about love. Liam followed her gaze and let out a slow, measured breath. Well, if it isn't the runaway groom. Ava's grip on her champagne glass tightened. Why is he here? Liam's expression darkened. More importantly, why is he acting like he still has a place here? As if sensing her attention, Chad's eyes met hers. For a moment, time stretched unbearably thin. Then, to her horror, he started walking toward them. Ava's stomach turned. He wouldn't dare. Liam smirked, though it didn't reach his eyes. Oh, he would. And he did. "Liam, Ava," Chad greeted smoothly, his voice dripping with false charm. Or should I say, Mr. and Mrs. Callahan? Ava fought to keep her expression neutral. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of knowing he affected her. "Chad," Liam drawled, his tone edged with something lethal. "Bold of you to show your face." Chad chuckled, as if this were all some inside joke. "Come on now, no hard feelings, right? We all make choices." Ava saw Liam's hand flex at his side, the only outward sign of the anger she knew was brewing beneath his calm exterior. Before he could say something that would cause a scene, She spoke first. "What do you want, Chad?" Chad sighed, shaking his head. Straight to the point. "I always did admire that about you, Ava." He tilted his glass toward them. "I just came to congratulate you. After all, it's not every day a woman gets left at the altar and still manages to land herself a billionaire husband." Liam's smirk sharpened into something dangerous. "And yet, you're the one standing here alone." The jab landed, but Chad recovered quickly. "You say that now, but how long do you think this little arrangement will last?" He leaned in slightly, voice dropping low. "We both know the truth, Ava. We both know the truth, Ava. This isn't real." Ava refused to flinch. "It's real enough to get under your skin." For the first time, Chad's easy confidence wavered. Just a flicker. But she saw it. Liam took a step closer, his presence radiating quiet menace. "If you're done embarrassing yourself, I suggest you walk away." Chad held his gaze for a beat longer before letting out a quiet laugh. "Enjoy your fairy tale while it lasts." Then he turned and disappeared back into the crowd. Ava released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She expected Liam to make some sharp remark, but when she glanced up at him, she saw something else in his expression. Something unreadable. "What?" she asked. Liam took her glass from her hand and set it aside. "You handled that well." She gave a small, humorless laugh.
What? You thought I'd cry?
His gaze flickered with something almost possessive. "No, I thought you'd slap him." Ava smirked. "Trust me, I wanted to." Liam exhaled, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "He's not done, you know. He's going to push. He wants you to break." She lifted her chin, then let him try. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Liam did something unexpected. He reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. His touch was warm, steady. Ava looked up at him. "What are you doing?" Liam's lips quirked. "Backing up my wife." And just like that, the weight in her chest felt a little lighter. The moment they stepped into the grand ballroom, Ava could feel the weight of every gaze falling upon her and Liam. The whispers that followed them like shadows no longer fazed her, but tonight something was different. There was an energy in the air, an unspoken tension threading through the room like an electric current. Liam, ever composed, kept his hand on the small of her back, guiding her forward with the effortless confidence of a man who owned the world. To anyone watching, they were a couple completely in sync, unshakable, untouchable. But Ava knew better. Underneath his calm exterior, there was a quiet storm brewing. As they made their way through the sea of well-dressed guests, she spotted him. Chad, who was standing near the bar, a glass of whiskey in his hand, laughing at something one of his equally smug-looking friends had said. He had no right to be here, but there he was, comfortable, as if nothing had ever happened. Ava's stomach twisted. Liam's voice was low beside her. "I told you he wouldn't stay quiet for long." She inhaled sharply, forcing herself to stay composed. "What do you think he wants?" Liam's fingers tightened slightly on her waist. "To remind you that he still exists. To test how much power he has left." Chad must have sensed them looking, because he turned, locking eyes with Ava across the room. A slow, arrogant smirk pulled at his lips before he started toward them. Liam let out a breath. "Here we go." Ava steadied herself as Chad came to a stop just a few feet away, his eyes flickering between her and Liam. "Ava," he greeted, his tone dripping with false warmth. "You look stunning tonight." Liam's expression remained unreadable, but Ava could feel the tension in his stance. She tilted her head slightly. "What are you doing here, Chad?" He let out a soft chuckle. "Is that any way to greet an old friend?" We had so many good memories together. Liam's voice was smooth, but laced with something razor sharp. I don't recall you being invited. Chad shrugged. It's a public event, isn't it? Ava refused to take the bait. It is, isn't it? She said coolly. But then, again, life is full of surprises. Chad smiled, but there was something predatory in his eyes. And yet, I can't help but wonder, how long can you really keep up this little charade? Liam took a step closer, his presence commanding. Careful, Chad. You're treading on dangerous ground. Chad chuckled, unbothered. Relax, I'm just making conversation. He turned back to Ava, his expression turning almost thoughtful. You know, I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us, about what we had. Ava stiffened, but she kept her face impassive. There is no us. He ignored that. I made a mistake. I should have been there that day. I let my fears get the best of me. Liam let out a low laugh. That's an interesting way of describing running away like a coward. Chad's jaw tightened for the briefest second before he masked it with a smirk. Say what you will, but Ava and I had something real. Liam's expression darkened, had being the operative word. Chad turned to Ava, ignoring Liam completely. Ava met his gaze head on. Yes, every second of it. Something flickered in Chad's eyes. Annoyance. Frustration. She couldn't tell, but she knew she'd struck a nerve. You're lying to yourself, he said, voice quieter now. You think this is love? Liam exhaled sharply, shaking his head. I think you should walk away before you embarrass yourself any further. Chad scoffed. You don't scare me, Callahan. Liam smiled then, but it was a dangerous thing. You should be scared. The air between them was thick with tension, and for a second, Ava thought Chad might actually say something reckless. But then, he took a step back, raising his hands in mock surrender. All right. No need to get hostile. I just wanted to say hello. Liam didn't move. You've said it. Now leave. Chad's smirk returned, but this time it didn't quite reach his eyes.
See you around, Ava.
And with that, he turned and disappeared back into the crowd. Ava exhaled, realizing only then how tightly she'd been gripping her clutch. Liam turned to her, his gaze unreadable. Are you okay? She forced a small smile. I think so. Liam studied her for a moment before nodding. He's not done, you know. Ava swallowed. I know. And as much as she wanted to pretend otherwise, she knew Chad wasn't going to just walk away. This wasn't over. Not yet. Ava sat by the grand window of Liam's estate, staring at the moonlit garden below. The air inside was thick with unspoken tension, a storm brewing just beneath the surface. The evening's confrontation with Chad had left her shaken, but she wouldn't let it show. Not in front of Liam. Not in front of anyone. Liam walked in, rolling up the sleeves of his crisp white dress shirt. He looked composed as always, but she could see the slight furrow in his brow, the way his jaw tightened ever so slightly. He was angry, not at her, but at Chad, at the fact that the past refused to stay buried. You've been quiet, Liam said, leaning against the desk across from her. Ava sighed, forcing a small smile. Just thinking. Liam tilted his head. About what? About how Chad is the same manipulative liar he always was. And how, even after all this time, he still knows how to get under my skin. She looked away, her fingers gripping the edge of her silk robe. I shouldn't have let him rattle me. Liam watched her carefully. He's desperate. He sees what we have, and he hates it. Ava let out a soft laugh, but there was no humor in it. You mean what we're pretending to have? Liam's gaze darkened. What we have is real enough for him to want to destroy it. The room fell into silence. Ava didn't know how to respond to that. Didn't know what to make of the way Liam looked at her. Like he wanted to say something but was holding himself back. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Liam straightened, his face hardening into the unreadable mask he always wore when dealing with business. Come in. The butler entered, bowing slightly. Sir? You may want to see this. Liam exchanged a glance with Ava before following the butler into the hallway. Curiosity and unease battled within her, but she trailed behind. As they reached the main study, the butler handed Liam a tablet. This was just posted a few minutes ago. Liam's eyes flicked across the screen, his expression turning to stone. Ava stepped closer, looking over his shoulder. A video was playing, a grainy, shaky clip taken at the ballroom earlier that evening. It showed her and Chad standing close, his hand barely grazing her arm. The angle made it seem as if she was leaning toward him, as if there was still something between them. The captions were worse. Old flames rekindle. Is Ava Monroe really over her ex? Below the video were thousands of comments, speculation, judgment, and worst of all, doubt. Ava felt the blood drain from her face. No, she whispered. This isn't real. It's twisted to look like something it's not. Liam's grip on the tablet tightened. Chad did this. Of course he did, Ava spat, frustration rising. He wants people to believe I'm still attached to him. That all of this, she gestured between her and Liam, is just a game. Liam's jaw clenched. Then we prove him wrong. Ava blinked. What do you mean? Liam turned to her, his blue eyes sharp with determination. We're going to show the world exactly what we want them to see. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something almost dangerous. If Chad wants to play games, then fine. Let's play. Ava's breath caught as Liam reached for her hand. His grip was warm, steady. She should have pulled away, but she didn't. What are you suggesting? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Liam smirked. A little damage control. If Chad wants to create a scandal, we'll give them a bigger one. Ava felt a chill, though not from fear. Liam. He tilted her chin up, his touch feather light. We make it real, Ava. In the eyes of the world, if they think we're just pretending, we'll erase every doubt. Her heart pounded. You're saying we. Get married, he finished smoothly. For real. Ava's eyes widened. That's insane. Is it? Liam challenged. You wanted to save your reputation. This will do more than that. It will end Chad's little game once and for all. Ava took a step back, shaking her head. Marriage is permanent, Liam. It doesn't have to be, he said calmly. It's a business deal. We stay together long enough to solidify our image, then part ways when the time is right. Ava's mind raced. It was ridiculous. Reckless, but also. Liam leaned in, his voice smooth as silk. Think about it, Ava. This way, Chad loses. You win. She swallowed hard. And what do you get out of this? Liam smirked. A wife who keeps the press at bay and helps me in ways I haven't even told you yet. She searched his face, trying to read beyond the surface. There's more to this for you, isn't there? Liam didn't deny it. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a velvet box. Flipping it open, he revealed a ring. Simple, elegant, and stunning. Ava inhaled sharply. You already had this planned. Liam smiled. I always plan ahead. Ava stared at the ring, her mind a whirlwind of doubts and possibilities. This wasn't just a way out. It was a declaration, a statement to the world that Chad had no control over her anymore. Slowly, she reached for the ring, her fingers brushing against the cool metal. If we do this, she said quietly, we do it my way. Liam chuckled.
That's what I was hoping you'd say.
Ava looked up at him, something shifting in her chest. Then let's give them a show. Ava adjusted the diamond ring on her finger, feeling its weight like a tangible reminder of the decision she had made. She still couldn't believe it. She still couldn't believe it. She and Liam were really doing this. A real marriage, albeit built on a foundation of strategy rather than love. But as the days passed, she couldn't shake the feeling that the lines between pretense and reality were beginning to blur. The media had latched onto their whirlwind engagement like sharks scenting blood. Every major news outlet ran with the headline, Liam Carter and Ava Monroe, a love story born from scandal. The coverage was relentless. Some called it the most romantic turnaround of the year, while others speculated it was a desperate ploy to save Ava's reputation. Either way, the world was watching. The engagement party was set at Liam's estate, a grand affair that screamed wealth and exclusivity. Everything was meticulously planned, from the floral arrangements to the candlelit ambience, designed to sell the illusion that they were madly in love. The guests, a mix of business elites and socialites, were already sipping champagne when Ava arrived, her sleek satin gown hugging every curve as she stepped into the spotlight. Liam was waiting for her at the top of the grand staircase. He looked devastatingly handsome in his tailored suit, his usual air of effortless confidence intact. The moment their eyes met, a silent understanding passed between them. Tonight, they had to convince everyone. Tonight, there was no room for hesitation. As Ava descended the stairs, Liam extended his hand, his fingers brushing lightly against hers. The warmth of his touch sent an unexpected thrill down her spine. She forced a dazzling smile, playing the role she had agreed to. But as he pulled her closer, whispering in her ear for the cameras, she realized something. Liam wasn't just pretending. His hand lingered on the small of her back, his voice softer than necessary. You look breathtaking, he murmured. Ava swallowed, ignoring the way her pulse quickened. You're good at this. Liam smirked, his blue eyes twinkling with something unreadable. So are you. The evening was going smoothly, until Ava excused herself to step onto the terrace, needing a moment to breathe. The cool night air was a welcome contrast to the suffocating attention inside. But just as she was beginning to relax, a familiar voice shattered the peace. Quite the show you're putting on. Ava stiffened. She turned to find Chad leaning against the stone railing, his expression one of smug amusement. He held a glass of whiskey, swirling the liquid lazily as if he had all the time in the world. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice sharper than intended. Chad chuckled. Your fiancé invited me. Business connections. You know how it is. He took a sip, watching her with that infuriating smirk. I must say, Ava, you're quite the actress. But do you really think anyone believes this fairy tale? Ava crossed her arms, refusing to let him see how much he rattled her. I don't care what you or anyone else believes. The engagement is real. Chad stepped closer, his voice dropping into something more dangerous. Then tell me, when he kisses you, do you feel anything? Or are you still thinking about me? Before she could respond, a strong arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her firmly against a solid chest. She doesn't have to answer that, Liam said coolly. His grip on Ava tightened just enough to be possessive. But if you're so curious, he turned to Ava with a knowing smirk. Why don't we show him? Ava barely had time to react before Liam cupped her face, his thumb grazing her jaw as he lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was meant to be for show, to silence Chad and solidify their charade. But the moment their lips met, the world tilted. Liam didn't just kiss her, he devoured her. The heat of it sent shockwaves through Ava's entire body. His lips moved against hers with a possessive urgency, his fingers tangling in her hair as if he wanted to claim her completely. For a moment, she forgot why they were doing this. She forgot Chad was watching. She forgot everything except the way Liam made her feel, like she was standing on the edge of something dangerous and exhilarating all at once. When they finally pulled apart, Ava was breathless. Liam, on the other hand, looked completely unfazed. But there was something dark and victorious in his gaze, as if he had just won a battle neither of them had acknowledged. Chad cleared his throat, his expression unreadable. "Well," he said, forcing a laugh. "That was convincing." Liam smirked. "Glad you think so." Chad tossed back the rest of his whiskey, setting the glass down with more force than necessary. "Enjoy your engagement, sweetheart," he muttered before walking away. As soon as he was gone, Ava turned to Liam, her heart still racing. Liam arched a brow. Damage control. Ava exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. "That kiss was necessary," Liam interrupted smoothly, "and effective." Ava searched his face, but he was unreadable, as always. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Liam's lips curved into the faintest smirk. "Maybe." Ava shook her head, turning away before he could see the confusion in her eyes. Because the truth was, she had felt something, and that scared her more than anything Chad could ever do. As they stepped back inside, the party continued as if nothing had happened. But Ava knew. Something had shifted. Something she wasn't ready to face. And neither, she suspected, was Liam. The soft hum of the ocean waves filled the air as Ava stood barefoot on the balcony of the honeymoon suite, watching the moonlight dance on the water's surface. The island was quiet now, the last of the guests having retired for the night after what had been an eventful and, surprisingly, beautiful wedding. She was married to Liam. What had started as a business arrangement had become something far more complicated, something she still couldn't quite define. The ceremony had been picture perfect, every detail meticulously planned, but the moment that truly stood out to her wasn't the carefully orchestrated vows or the exquisite reception. It was the way Liam had looked at her when they had been declared husband and wife. The intensity in his gaze, the way he had held her hands as if anchoring himself to her. Ava exhaled, hugging her arms around herself as the night breeze kissed her skin. She wasn't sure what she expected to feel now that it was all done. Relief, contentment. Instead, a strange restlessness stirred inside her, an anticipation that she couldn't quite shake. The sound of footsteps made her turn, and there he was, Liam standing in the doorway, tie loosened, the top buttons of his shirt undone. He looked different, less like the poised, confident businessman and more like a man who had just laid everything on the line and wasn't sure what came next. "You're not sleeping?" he asked, stepping onto the balcony beside her. She shook her head. "Too much on my mind." Liam leaned against the railing, hands resting casually on the wood, though his posture was anything but relaxed. "Regrets already?" Ava turned to face him fully, studying his face. "No," she admitted. "Just—" Liam let out a slow breath, as if he'd been waiting for her to ask that very question. He turned slightly, his gaze locking onto hers. "That depends on what you want to happen." The air between them grew charged, thick with something unsaid. Ava wasn't naive. She knew what he meant. Their marriage had begun as an arrangement, but the past few weeks had proven that whatever was between them was real, even if neither of them had the courage to name it. Ava swallowed, her fingers tightening around the railing. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in the best way. "Ava, tell me what you want." Her heart pounded. She wanted clarity. She wanted certainty. But more than anything, she wanted him. Instead of answering, she did the one thing she had been too afraid to do until now. She reached for him, her fingers brushing over his jaw before tangling in his hair. And then she kissed him. Liam didn't hesitate. The moment their lips met, he pulled her against him, his hand settling on her waist with a possessiveness that sent shivers through her. The kiss was slow, deep, filled with everything they hadn't said. The fear, the longing, the undeniable pull that had been growing between them since the beginning. When they finally broke apart, Ava rested her forehead against his, breathless. "So," Liam murmured, his thumb tracing slow circles against her hip. "No regrets." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "No regrets." Liam's grip tightened, and there was something almost vulnerable in his eyes. "Then, let's do this right, Ava. No pretending. No pretending. No contracts, just you and me." Ava felt something shift inside her, something freeing. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of what came next. She smiled, threading her fingers through his, "Just you and me." And with that, their story truly began. Life has a way of surprising us, often in the most unexpected moments. Ava and Liam's story reminds us that sometimes the paths we never intended to walk lead us exactly where we were meant to be. What started as an arrangement turned into something real, proving that love isn't always about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. It's about the choices we make, the risks we take, and the people we allow into our hearts. One of the biggest lessons from this journey is that healing and moving forward aren't about forgetting the past, but about finding the courage to embrace the future. Ava could have let betrayal define her, but instead she allowed herself to grow, to trust again, and to open her heart to something new. Liam, too, had to let go of his guarded walls and realize that vulnerability doesn't make a person weak. It makes them human. This story teaches us that love is not about grand gestures or flawless perfection. It's about showing up, being present, and choosing each other every day. It's about seeing beyond someone's past and believing in the person they are becoming. So, if you've ever faced heartbreak, disappointment, or uncertainty about the future, remember this: your story isn't over yet. Sometimes, the best chapters come when you least expect them. Now, tell us, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next one. We appreciate you and can't wait to share more incredible stories with you. See you in the next video.